Hey everybody, this is Rod Meldrum, the Book of Mormon Evidence Guy. I have had a wonderful time. The last 3 episodes have been fantastic with Carl Anderson, Mr. Kirtland, and talking a little bit about the Kirtland Temple and its acquisition by the church from the Community of Christ. And so we want to refer back to those. If you haven't already done so, you can check them out here and go back and watch those. But this is going to be episode number 4, and I wanted to go into more of a deep dive into the Nauvoo purchases by the church from the Community of Christ. So if you haven't already gone back, and we just want to have a shout out to those who are our friends of the Community of Christ. We're so grateful for them for being willing to take care of these properties for so many years and take such good care of them. We know it's a painful thing to let these properties go, but we think it's a good move on both their part and on the part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to acquire these properties and make sure that they're going to be properly preserved into the future. All right, so what you see here in this image is the Nauvoo Temple, and it's sitting on a bluff there, and you can see the temple, the statue of Joseph and Hiram on their horses, and then you see the Nauvoo Temple in the background there. I want you to notice right off the bat, just in the previous episode, in number 3, we talked a little bit about the symbolism of the square, the circle, and the octagon. If you hadn't seen that, you need to go back and check those out. It's really fascinating symbolism, but basically the idea is that the rectangle in this particular case, which is the base of the spire, the temple itself is a rectangle, and the base of the spire is a rectangle. That represents the earth. The top of it has Moroni on the top of it with 3 spheres that are underneath the feet of Moroni, representing the 3 degrees of the celestial kingdom. And that is where God dwells. That's eternity, eternal life, where God is. And then you have this kind of a cupola over the top, kind of a half dome or half circle. And then there's these 3 sections that are all octagonal. So there's one octagon on top of the on top of the next, on top of the next, and that represents the base is the earth. God is up here. In between that is the seal of Melchizedek, which we've talked about previously, and it's only through Christ that we can go from the earth to God. So it's only through Christ that can be done, and that's the reason for the temples actually, is to learn how to do that. So that's part of the Nauvoo Temple here. So this is another group here in front of the Nauvoo Temple on a beautiful day, and you can see the holiness to the Lord. You can see this is an amazing structure for its day. It's even bigger than the Kirtland Temple, and actually is a beautiful building. Even by today's standards, it was gorgeous back in that time. This is of course a rebuilt temple. It was redone, even using the same architectural plans and so forth that we have that were preserved from that. I just love this image of the Nauvoo Temple as it sits peacefully there on top of the bluff overlooking the Mississippi River. And I wanted to point out a few things that most people are not aware of. So, for example, this is a close-up image of one of the earliest maps of the Nauvoo area. And you can see the temple site right here. You can move this around so you can kind of see this temple site right here. It has this kind of this bump out here in the front. The temple is sitting right here in the middle of that particular square. This is Mulholland Street, which most people are aware of, and then there's Knight Street on the other side of it there. Mulholland Street actually goes down and drops off of the bluff there. But you can see these little hash marks. That is indicating a drop in elevation. That's kind of a hillside right there. So the temple's sitting up on top. It drops down here. And then you see some really interesting things over here in sections 82 and 83. Those, brothers and sisters, are ancient Native American mounds made by the Hopewell mound builder culture and civilization that existed here in the area in the time frames of the Book of Mormon. These, as you know, from those of you who have been studying and are aware of the Heartland research, this is the Nephites of the Book of Mormon. And these are some of their actual structures. I think it's fascinating that Joseph Smith located the temple directly above and it's directly centered with what they called the Big Mound back in those days. If you go back into church history, many times the brethren would say, let's meet at the Big Mound and we'll go from there. In fact, when Joseph Smith was headed to Carthage, he met his bodyguards at the Big Mound before they headed to fateful Carthage, where he was ultimately assassinated. You can see there's a couple other mounds there in section number 83, or block number 83, also in block number 78, and then block number 70. Just north of that, there's several other mounds. As you continue on north of Nauvoo, there's actually a property that's owned by the Curley family from Idaho, and they bought some acreage there a number of years ago, and they started finding interesting things on their property. Like, for example, directly behind their house is this huge ramp that goes up to a fortification, an ancient fortification. There are about almost a dozen different mounds that have been on their property. Most of these mounds have been looted and excavated previously back in the 1800s, most likely. But they have been in the process of working with the Illinois Antiquities to restore these mounds back to what they were. So there's actually, I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of those mounds here in a minute. But that's basically the. I wanted to let you know that the temple is literally centered on a Hopewell mound. If the Hopewell are the Nephites, then that actually is fascinating. I'm going to tell you something more about this when we get down to the red brick store and the Smith family cemetery. I think you're going to find this absolutely fascinating stuff if you're familiar with the Heartland research. There's another beautiful image of the Nuavoo temple. This is a little bit from higher up, and you can kind of see out in the background. This is from the top of the bluff here. But this, you can actually now see that the temple is sitting up on a bluff, and you can see the Mississippi River out in the background. Now, technically, that's not the Mississippi River. That is actually Lake Cooper, because on the far left-hand side and just around the bend there is Keokuk, and there's a dam there. The dam was built because of the Des Moines Rapids, which actually was on the right-hand side of this image, was a set of rapids called the Des Moines Rapids, which actually were so shallow that riverboats could not get further than this up the Mississippi River. If they were coming from the south, basically like Louisiana, and New Orleans down there in Louisiana, if they took a riverboat from there and headed up the Mississippi River, this is as far as they could get before they were stopped. And that plays a very significant part. This is actually the Lake Cooper as it is there today. Okay, and I'm going to go back to this shot here. I wanted to point out, though, that the original name of Nauvoo wasn't Nauvoo. It was actually called Commerce. Why was it called Commerce? Because the riverboats couldn't get past this point. But if you could get past this point, you could get riverboats on the north side, and they could actually go another 180 miles further up the Mississippi River and clear way up further north. And so this became a very strategic location. In fact, on the left-hand side of this image is Keokuk on the other side of the river. If you look to the north of this, it goes up to straight across the river is what's called Montrose, and then further up is Fort Madison. When the riverboats would be plying the Mississippi River, they would come up to this point, and they would offload their goods because they couldn't get past this rapid. By the way, the rapid was only the mean depth of the rapid was only 2.3 feet deep, so about 2 foot 4 inches deep. Which is barely up to my knee, actually. And we have actually historical accounts of Joseph Smith and others, actually posses even, crossing the Mississippi River there at those rapids, literally riding their horses across the Mississippi River. Anciently, and in Joseph Smith's day, the river down by Keokuk was about 2,500 feet wide, and up at Fort Madison is about 2,500 feet wide. But here at the Des Moines Rapids, it widened out to over 4,500 feet wide, which is how there's a big limestone shelf that goes across here, which was part of what was responsible for causing Nauvoo to be a swamp, but also made it so that it was too shallow for riverboats to go any further. So the reason why Nauvoo was originally called Commerce is because the boats would have to come up, they would have to park their riverboats, take the cargo off, and then portage it in wagons up around the Big Bend, around Nauvoo area. If they were on the other side of the river, they had to go clear out around the bend, because the bend comes like this, and they had to go clear out around the bend to take it from Keokuk up to Fort Madison. But if they could get actually the swamps of Nauvoo drained, then instead they could actually go straight across. Instead of going around the bend, they could actually go directly across the bend and cut off several miles of time and wagon and cost. And so the Saints were actually taking a lot of that business, portaging the goods and the products coming up the river around this bend and then onto riverboats up above, and then they could take it another 180 miles up into up further north. So that's the reason why this was originally called Nauvoo, or excuse me, originally called Commerce. And this image just shows you can kind of see there's the area there as it drops down. I'm going to show you a couple of other pictures here in just a minute that talk about that as well. But I wanted to share with you one really, I felt it was a really honor to be able to do this. I actually was working with the Community of Christ on an archaeological dig for the Joseph Smith Sr. and Lucy Mack Smith home. And in my hand right here is a piece of pottery from the Nauvoo period. This is Paul DeBarth and myself. After I dug one of these out of the ground, I actually had the opportunity to dig out the stool, or the stoop, I should say, of the Joseph Smith Sr. home. In the background in this image, you'll see that this is the mansion house, okay, looking basically to the north. We're in the archaeological dig here, and just found this artifact, and it was being categorized and cataloged and so forth by Paul DeBarth, who is the archaeological expert with the Community of Christ. Wonderful individual. Loved working with him. This is actually me working on the front step, basically, of the Joseph Smith Sr.'s home and Lucy Mack Smith home. So this is actually, the step had been removed, and we were just down underneath that, working to see if there's any other artifacts that were down below that level. This is a little shout out from me there. Have travel, will travel. Well, so I only was able to work there for a couple of days each of 2 summers, so that was a lot of fun to actually work with them. This is this is the mansion house that the Community of Christ actually has owned for many years. A lot of members of the church have gone to Nauvoo and haven't been able to go through it because you had to be part of a pretty comprehensive tour that would be done by the Community of Christ that started at their visitor center. And it was about a 3 or 4 hour commitment to be able to do that. And a lot of people come to Nauvoo, they just go see the sites that they have. They have like a day or half a day to see Nauvoo, and they just don't have time to do that. Plus, it was also a tour that you would need to pay for, and the Community of Christ would use that money to help to keep these places up. So again, we want to shout out to the Community of Christ for their efforts in doing this. I've been on their tour several different times with different tour guides, and it was always a wonderful experience to go and go through these wonderful homes of Joseph Smith. So there's a little closer view of the mansion house. Now, the mansion house originally had another piece that was on the back side of it there that's been taken down. You can see the base, the foundation of it still, but this is the mansion house pretty much as it looked, probably back in the time of Joseph Smith. They're pretty similar. This is the actual archaeological dig that I was working in. I'll never forget, one morning we came to the dig and there was a great big box turtle that climbed in from the river and came up and was stuck in the dig. Couldn't work its way out. So we had to rescue it, go take it back down to the river before we could get going on the archaeological digging for the day. But this is actually a parking lot there. And this is essentially looking east. And this is where we were doing the dig for the Joseph Smith Sr. and Lucy Mack Smith residence. Now, looking essentially directly across the street to the west, and this is a little bit to the south and west, you have on the right-hand side there is the Smith cabin. This is where Joseph and Emma first lived when they first came to Nauvoo. They lived in that cabin for a while. Then they built this kind of a frame home to the left of that. You can see the well there just to the left of that. And out in the background is Lake Cooper, which is the Mississippi River. This actually sits on a little bit of a bluff. You can see it just drops down about another maybe 10 or 15 feet to the river level back below that. And on the far right-hand side is the Smith family cemetery. So you see that. I'm going to show you a couple of images of that as well. So this is the red brick store. And the red brick store has an interesting history. It's one of the most significant as far as women's groups, because the Relief Society was actually organized there. And there's numerous other historical things that happened there in the red brick store. And one of the things I wanted to tell about that not many people know about, in fact, hardly anybody knows about this except for a few people in the community of Christ and people who've been on my tours before. But you see the sidewalk in the front there. The community of Christ realized that they needed to improve the electrical service to the red brick store. And so they're going to put in a new electrical line, and they needed to dig a trench on the far side of that sidewalk, along the sidewalk, down to get it to where they could hook up to some additional power, and then bring it into the red brick store. In doing so, they brought out one of these big ditch witches, a big trenching machine. The big trencher would actually have the big wheel that kind of comes around, and it digs down into the dirt, and it brings up things as it creates a trench to put the cable in. All of a sudden, bones started flying out of the trencher, and like, whoa, stop! There's some bones. They started looking at them, and they were actually human bones. And they decided to stop for a little bit and do what they call a salvage dig, which is essentially they don't use all the protocols of archaeological regular digging, but they needed to get these things out of the way and save them from the machinery. And so they actually did a kind of a salvage dig along here. What they found was pretty incredible. They found that these were human bones, and they were not just any human bones. They were human bones along with artifacts. The artifacts tell us that the people who were buried here, along with their artifacts, were Hopewell mound builder people who had been buried right here between the red brick store and the Smith family cemetery. And let me see if I got the other shot there. This is looking a little bit the other direction, so you can see the same sidewalk here in the foreground. You had the Smith family cemetery is fenced back behind that. You can see it kind of dropping off to the river on the right-hand side. But there's this just grassy area there, and it turns out, brothers and sisters, that there's at least 25 Native American burials there. And again, the Native Americans that were buried there, according to the artifacts, they had some stone pipes. They had some other artifacts that were found there, some arrowheads and things that indicate that this is definitely the Hopewell mound builder civilization. And amazingly enough, this is a bluff that goes along here. But if you take a look at the red brick store from the far side, it actually looks like it's sitting on a mound. It literally looks like it was built on a mound. And it turns out that this is a Hopewell cemetery. Now, along with that, the Hopewell cemetery here, you have the Smith family cemetery. I think it's just absolutely fascinating, my friends, that Joseph Smith and Emma, his wife, and Hiram, his beloved brother, and Joseph Smith's parents, Lucy Mack and Joseph Smith Sr., and other of the Smith family are literally all buried in a Nephite cemetery on the banks of the River Sidon, if the Heartland research is correct. I don't know who's buried there. It would be interesting to know who of the Nephites was buried there. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if on resurrection morning, if some people show up there along with Joseph and Emma and the Smith family, and some of those people we may actually have heard about in the Book of Mormon. Well, I don't know. That's a speculation, but it's an interesting thought. Why would Joseph Smith and his family be all buried in the same place as these Hopewell mound builder people who we believe would have been the Nephites? So there's just another little tidbit of information that not many people know about. This is another image from further up. I had a good friend of mine who took me on a small private plane to get some photography of the temple and the surrounding area. This is actually looking to the north and west. You can see the river coming around. This is again Lake Cooper, and you have Keokuk is way farther on the left-hand side. Montrose is just directly in front of the temple. If you follow the temple straight forward and be on the left-hand side, and this is actually looking a little bit closer up towards Fort Madison. So you can see the general layout of the Nauvoo area. I mentioned I was going to show you some of the mounds that are there. This is actually on the Curly property. This is one of the mounds there. You can see this is a pretty large mound. It's about 30 feet across, about 5 to 7 feet tall. And it's a big, circular mound there. And there's many other ones just like this one. This is just one I just took. I wanted to just kind of show you an example of that. This sweet lady was actually with the Community of Christ. This is actually taken, the picture was taken in the basement of the red brick store, where she would sequester herself down there and take the items coming from the I Dig Nauvoo program of the Community of Christ. She would take those pieces and parts and try to put them together and actually reform many of the pieces that had been lost to time and history. So she was like doing a 3D jigsaw puzzle without a picture of what it was. She had to literally put them all together. She's amazing how she could take these pieces and figure out how they all went back together again, and she would glue them back together and put them, and those are all in the, I don't know for sure if the purchase of the red brick store included all the artifacts and things that are in the basement like this. I'm hoping that they did, because I hope that they will be made available, because the Community of Christ would almost never allow people to go down and take a look at that. Even when you're on the tours, it was kind of an off-limits area, and so there's some of that. But I wanted to also point out, this is something that I think is absolutely fascinating. Those of you who are familiar with the Heartland research, you know that the woodland period basically is the time frame of the Book of Mormon here in North America. The people who are here in the woodland period were primarily the Hopewell Mound Builder people, who we have been talking about and saying are the Nephites of the Book of Mormon here in North America. And it turns out that pretty much almost all of the artifacts that have been found in the I Dig Nauvoo program with the Community of Christ have been Hopewell Mound Builder period artifacts. As you can see here on the lower left-hand side are arrow points and so forth. There's scrapers here in the middle. There are other smaller ones and pieces of pottery and things that have been found. The early Archaic period actually would date back into Jaredite time frames. So that gives you kind of an idea of some of that. The very bottom left-hand corner is an actual, it's a stone drill. You'd hold that in your fingers and you'd basically rotate it back and forth with your wrist. And actually you could drill through softer rock or even leather or or wood or other kind of materials there. And anyway, I just find it fascinating to think that the place where Joseph Smith decided to put down roots there in Nauvoo would have been the same place that the Hopewell Mound Builders were. And that all makes sense because of the Des Moines Rapids. Okay, so what I'm saying is that because of Des Moines Rapids, anciently, if you had big armies, like you had like a Lamanite army of 30, 40, 50,000 people, men, and you needed to get them across the river to attack the Nephites, you would have to go to some place where you could cross the river on foot, or you'd have to take canoes over. And of course, taking a canoe over is not that good of an idea, because basically, if you had 15 or 20 or 50 canoes, you bring the canoes over. You drop off those guys. The Nephites come out. They battle with them and kill those guys and send the guys back for more guys with the canoe. So obviously that doesn't work. So they would need to go to some place where they could actually march their men over on foot and get across the river. That would mean that this place, Nauvoo, or what was originally called Commerce, would have become one of the most strategic locations in all of North America. Because if you could control this one rapid, you could literally control who has access back and forth across a mile-wide river, which is not easy to just negotiate. You can't just, it's not something that an average person can just swim across, especially not in, spring and summer when the river is running high. In the fall and late summer, the river actually got so, the depth of the river would get so low that people could actually cross on foot, and actually would do that. This is an image that I took. This is actually a good friend of mine. He actually was at the Dixon Mounds Museum. Is Alan Harn is his name. He, I think, is retired from there. But one time when we had a group of our tour members with us, we went up into his office and he showed us this map of the area around Nauvoo, Illinois. Now, Nauvoo, Illinois is right here. This is the bend of the river that Nauvoo is right here. And you see these red dots. The red dots all indicate, each red dot represents a location with known ancient Native American remains on the sites. So these are prehistoric sites, basically. And he was telling us a little bit about it. If you take a look around the Nauvoo area, you can see there's several different ones. There's a kind of the big one. That's the one that was the big mound. That big mound was taken down sometime after the Saints left Nauvoo. We don't know when or who did that, but they were involved, and it's no longer there today. These are the mounds that are all along the bluff right here. The Curly residence and these mounds that are up here along this bluff and goes up all the way over here. But you see, basically, there's Native American findings all the way along this bluff. Now, what was curious is I said, well, I asked Alan Harn, I said, so what's the deal with these lines? Like this, there's a line coming down right here. There's another line that's coming across down here. This is a big line that goes up through here and then turns and goes from east to west, goes along here and creates another big line. So all of these seem to be in big lines, and this one over here on the far right hand side, on the upper right hand side, see that big line of red dots there? I said, so why is it that the ancient Native Americans would actually build their things in these straight lines like that? And he says, oh, that has nothing to do with what the Native Americans did. That has to do with what we do. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, because when we put in a pipeline, for example, there was a big pipeline that was put in up in the left-hand part, the upper right-hand part of this coming down. That was a pipeline that was being put in. And before they could put the pipeline in, they had to do an archaeological survey and find out what kind of remains they might be disturbing in the process. And essentially everywhere that they went in Illinois, there were Native American remains, Native American things that were left over that they would find. In fact, Alan Harn said that today they know of at least 160,000 Native American sites in just Illinois alone. And he says, and less than 10% of Illinois has even been looked at yet archaeologically. Well, if you have 160,000 sites and you've only done 10%, that gives you some kind of an idea of how extensive this massive civilization was here in Illinois. And specifically, also you see that there was actually even things over there in Nauvoo. The bigger thing, the bigger lines and so forth are areas where they have found even greater concentrations of these Native American sites. And you'll see that a lot of times they follow along rivers, along the banks of the rivers and so forth. They're just everywhere. In fact, Alan Harn literally said that in Illinois, it would be harder to find a site that doesn't have Native American artifacts and remains on it than there is than trying to find a site that does, because almost every place in Illinois is covered with Native American artifacts. I just find that absolutely fascinating. I hope you do as well. This is actually an image of the ramp behind the Curly residence going up to a fortification up above on the bluff up above their home. They live down pretty close within about probably 200 or 300 feet of the river there. And this is a ramp that would go up to the fortifications behind their house when they bought their house there. This is the Smith family cabin. The log cabin is on the left-hand side behind the house. You can't quite see it. You can see the well there in the front on the right-hand side. And this is where Joseph and Emma lived while they were building the mansion house. Okay, so I just wanted to reiterate how amazing it is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints now has pretty much all of the historical sites of Kirtland that have buildings and things on it. There's a lot more of that. I want to remind everybody, though, that Kirtland was an area that the saints were concentrated in, but amazingly, the area across the river that the Lord called Zarahemla in section 125 in the Doctrine and Covenants, that area over there was called Half-Breed Tract. And after the revelation that Joseph Smith was received about Zarahemla being across the river from Nauvoo, they began to buy up that land in a big way and actually owned more land on the half-breed tract across the river in Iowa, in Montrose, Iowa, than they did on the Nauvoo side. So it's actually fascinating to consider that. Unfortunately, when the Saints left the area, the land records were all held there in Montrose, and there was an unfortunate fire that wiped out all the land records, so nobody was able to verify or prove that they owned the land over there. So it basically just went back up for sale and was sold. And so we don't know much about who owned property and how much property they each had and so forth over there. But it is fascinating to consider that one of the very first stakes that was set up in this dispensation was the Zarahemla, Iowa stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I think that's another fascinating thing. Brothers and sisters, I hope that you get a little bit more of an understanding of why these sites like Kirtland and Nauvoo are so important. If you get a chance to come back, I'd love to invite you to come back with me. We take tours a couple times a year. And if you go on a tour with anyone else, you're going to miss more than a half of the information that you could get as you're literally going along the same lands. If the Heartland geography model of the Book of Mormon is correct, then what you have here in North America, you have Adamic history. Adam and Eve and their posterity were here up until the time of the flood. Then you have Jaredite history that comes in after that here in North America. And then the Jaredite nation was destroyed at this place called Hill Cumorah in Palmyra, New York area. Then you have the Nephite nation that rises to power here in America. And then they turn on each other and they destroy themselves from within again. Then you have the remnant of the Lamanites that were here. And then you have Gentiles coming over. And then they basically take over this area that we now call the United States of America. And we have risen to power for a number of years. And so you have all of these different histories, including U.S. history and then also now church history, all focused on the same sacred lands here in the heartland of North America. This is the reason why we are so grateful that the church has been able to purchase these properties, to be able to preserve that history and let people know about it, to be able to go back there and actually see the places where the prophet Joseph Smith, walked and where he rode his horses and the history played out basically of the early part of the church. I am so grateful that our church has the capability to be able to financially take care of these places. That is because of the wonderful resources of the membership of the church who have given generously and have obeyed the law of tithing. And then also the church's great stewardship that they have had over the tithing funds and using those funds to increase and to be able to have the wherewithal to be able to preserve these sites. I am so grateful for my membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and for the ability that we have to preserve this sacred history. I'm also grateful for those who have helped to preserve the history of the area around Israel and Christ and Capernaum and Jerusalem and the city of David and so forth, and those who are preserving that history. These are sacred sites, my friends, and I hope that you have a chance to go back and see them. If you don't, then this is a great way for you to become acquainted with them, even if you're not actually there. Thank you so much for being a part of our podcast. I hope you're enjoying these. These are some deep dives. I know they're kind of long. I appreciate that. But if you can, if you like this kind of content and you want to keep it going, just hit subscribe here below. That helps us to be able to let about when we have new content coming out. We are. I'm so grateful for the opportunity I've had to work with Legacy Tours and Travel. And taking these tours back. If you haven't had a chance to go on a tour with me, I'd appreciate if you just check it out. It's literally life-changing. I could give you hundreds and hundreds of examples and testimonials of people who have had the tours and how much that's changed their life. I've even had general authorities who've been on the tour who basically said at the beginning, this is not going to change my testimony because I already have a rock-solid testimony of the gospel and specifically of the Book of Mormon. But at the end of the tour, I said, I can't believe how much this has affected my testimony of the reality of the Book of Mormon. So, my brothers and sisters, I hope that you'll continue to join me on these podcasts. Again, support if you can. Go to the website. We have more information there. Share this with your friends and your neighbors, and let's get the Book of Mormon out to the world. We sure appreciate your help in doing so. And you have a fabulous day. Enjoy your journey.